Today in Forensic Intelligence, we have the case of the 2-year signal, when collapse reveals calling. There is a signal most people ignore because they assume chaos. They assume chaos means failure, and failure means something is wrong with them. But what if the collapse wasn't sabotage at all? What if it was timing, alignment, jurisdiction, a message encoded in the rhythm of your life, telling you you're not meant to stay here? Today I'm putting a pattern on trial, a 2-year pattern that followed me from job to job, contract to contract, company to company. And every time I overstayed the assignment, the environment collapsed. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we are examining the case, not of instability, but of instruction, not misfortune, mandate, not randomness, revelation. 3 companies, 3 collapses, all within the same window of time, approximately 24 months. The defendant is not fate. The defendant is not misinterpretation. And the charge is simple: failure to recognize a divine developmental cycle. Exhibit A, the pattern. Company 1 was 2 years, contract lost. Company 2 was 2 years, business folds. Company 3 was 2 years, misalignment peaks until exit is inevitable. Different bosses, different industries, different seasons, one identical outcome. This is not bad luck. This is not job hopping. This is jurisdictional exploration. Precedent number 1, human development cycles. In adult developmental behavior theory by Keegan and Fisher, identity tends to move in 2 to 3 year adaptive cycles. New identity structures form. Old coping strategies dissolve. Cognitive complexity expands. Emotional processing deepens. New meaning-making architecture emerges. They describe capacity expansion over 24 to 30-month periods. This is the psychology version of doubling. Not IQ, not skill. Inner architecture. Your external conditions shift because your internal structure has already changed. Precedent number 2, spiritual formation cycles. In scripture, the 2-year window repeatedly appears as a period of preparation, revelation, transition, elevation. Joseph in prison to the palace. Genesis 41:1. At the end of 2 full years, they shift from confinement to rulership. Paul after Damascus. Galatians 1:18. Roughly 2 years of recalibration before emerging with clarity and authority. Number 3, David's transition. Patterns of conflict, growth, and kingship, shifts occurring in clustered 2-year windows. 2 years marks the completion of one identity phase and the beginning of the next jurisdiction. Number 4, personal precedent. Discernment sharpened, alignment deepened, revelation increased every 2 years. Different season, same timing. The signal is consistent. Here's my analysis. When a system can no longer contain your calling, it doesn't just stagnate, it destabilizes. It is written, new wine demands new wineskins. When you stay in place past this assignment, the environment buckles. Not because you are weak, but because you are expanding faster than the environment can evolve. A place designed to introduce you to evidence cannot contain the version of you that arrives after you've possessed it. Here's my autopsy report. Causes of collapse, identity expansion. Time of collapse, 24 months post-entry. Underlying condition, jurisdictional mismatch. External symptoms, contract loss, business failure, leadership chaos, personal misalignment. The assignment was complete. This was instability. It was elevation disguised as disruption. A reminder that you were not meant to survive in these environments. You were meant to graduate from them. In close, there are 2 kinds of people: those who see patterns as punishment and those who see patterns as prophecy. The 2-year collapse wasn't the world falling apart. It was your old identity falling away. The evidence shows it wasn't. You weren't losing a job. You were outgrowing them. You weren't failing. You were being prepared. You weren't being rejected. You were being redirected into the jurisdiction that matches who you are. The verdict is simple. What looked like instability was timed elevation. And the cycle didn't stop because the pattern ended. It stopped because the assignment began. Your 2-year cycle was not chaos. It was confirmation. Every collapse was proof. You were never meant to remain in employment. You were meant to rise into the identity only you can sustain. This is Forensic Intelligence. I'm Jay Rush Philosophy. Stay focused, stay forensic, stay aligned.